Cop laughs at black girl's story. Then her special forces father shows up. The late afternoon sun stretched golden light across the sleepy town of Maple Ridge, where everything seemed to move just a little slower than the rest of the world. Tanya Brooks, 17 and sharp-willed beyond her years, gripped the wheel of her mother's old sedan as it rolled steadily down Pine Street. Her learner's permit sat snug in her wallet, but today she was driving alone, a decision made less from choice and more from need. Her mother, Regina Brooks, had undergone surgery on her lower back just 3 days earlier, and when the pain medication unexpectedly ran out, Tanya did what no one else could. She stepped up. She kept her eyes forward, both hands tight at 10 and 2, just like her father had taught her during their last visit together. Smooth hands, strong mind, he'd always said. But her mind wasn't feeling particularly strong at the moment. Her stomach churned with worry. One trip to the pharmacy. In and out. She could do this. It wasn't like she was joyriding. This was survival. As she pulled up to a red light at Elm and Fifth, her nerves briefly eased, until a flash of red and blue erupted behind her, bouncing in her rearview mirror like a threat, a police cruiser. Her heart dropped. No, no. Please not today. She checked her speed, under the limit. She had used her signal. She was wearing her seatbelt. What had she done wrong? The cruiser's siren gave a single chirp. Tanya flicked on her turn signal, her hands now clammy, and slowly pulled the car to the curb. The vehicle behind her did the same, lights still strobing. A low thrum of panic moved through her as she remembered every conversation her father, Master Sergeant Nathan Brooks, had ever had with her about police encounters. Stay calm, stay polite, keep your hands in sight. The officer stepped out of his cruiser, tapping something into a device strapped to his chest. As he approached, Tanya rolled down her window halfway, her voice barely steady. "Good afternoon, officer." He was a tall, stocky man in his 40s with thinning blonde hair and mirrored sunglasses that reflected her anxious face back at her. His nameplate read H. Cartwright. He didn't return her greeting. Instead, he spoke flatly. "License and registration." Tanya's voice cracked slightly. "I have a learner's permit, sir. I'm not licensed yet." She handed it over carefully, then reached into the glove box for the registration. Her hand brushed the hazard button and the blinkers flared briefly. "Turn those off," he barked. "You're not broken down." "Sorry," she mumbled, fumbling with the button. He took the documents from her and looked them over. "You're not supposed to be driving alone with this. Where's your licensed adult?" "My mom just had surgery," Tanya said. "She can't drive. We ran out of her meds and I—" Cartwright raised a hand to cut her off. "Step out of the vehicle." Tanya froze. "Am I being arrested?" "Step out of—" "the car." She opened the door slowly, her legs trembling as she stepped out. The afternoon sun burned against her skin, but the cold creeping inside her came from something else. He walked around the car once, then returned to her. "Your left taillight is out. You know that?" "No, sir," she said. "I didn't." Cartwright shook his head and clicked something on his shoulder radio. "Dispatch, I've got a juvenile driver, solo, learner's permit, vehicle defect. Requesting backup." Tanya's eyes widened. "Backup?" Cartwright gave a half laugh. "Standard procedure, driving without supervision, possible reckless endangerment." She stood there, stunned, on the shoulder of the road. Cars passed. Some slowed to stare. An elderly woman even shook her head disapprovingly through her windshield. "I was just getting my mom's pain medication," Tanya said again. "She had surgery on her spine last week." "Right," Cartwright said, the corner of his mouth twitching into a smirk. "And let me guess, your dad's a Navy SEAL too?" Tanya blinked. "No, he's Army, Special Forces. Cartwright laughed outright this time, a sharp bark that echoed down the street. "Oh, of course he is. They always are, right, girl? Come on." Everyone's dad is special forces when they're trying to get out of a ticket. Tanya flinched. That laugh. It wasn't just disbelief, it was dismissal. She could feel the weight of it in her chest. "He's really in the Army," she said, quieter now. "Just got back from deployment last week." "Sure," Cartwright said. "And I'm the Director of Homeland Security." "You kids think we're all stupid." Tanya could feel her face heating, not just from the sun, but from shame, fury, and disbelief all twisting together. This man, this stranger, had already made up his mind about her. "My dad is Master Sergeant Nathan Brooks," she said more forcefully. "5th Special Forces Group. He served for 20 years. Cartwright chuckled again, reaching for his citation pad. "Sounds made up. You got a phone? Text your imaginary Green Beret, Dad." "Let's see if he shows." Tanya pulled her phone out with shaking hands. Her fingers tapped fast. "Dad." "Pulled over. On Pine and Elm. Cop says I was driving illegally. He's laughing at me. Please come." She hit send, then slipped the phone back into her pocket, her body stiff and her mouth dry. "Don't worry," Cartwright said, sarcasm thick in his voice. "We'll be real nice to Daddy when he gets here." Tanya looked down at her shoes. She didn't want to cry. Not here, not now. But if her dad showed up the way she knew he would, composed, proud, and in uniform, this officer was about to learn a lesson the hard way. Back at the Brooks household, Nathan stood in the middle of the kitchen, still in his regulation tee, sweat glistening from his early morning run. The room was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional chirp of a bird outside. Regina, still recovering, slept in the den with a heating pad pressed against her back. When Nathan's phone buzzed on the counter, he grabbed it instinctively. The message from Tanya hit him like a jolt of cold water. "Dad." "Pulled over. On Pine and Elm. Cop says I was driving illegally. He's laughing at me. Please come." Nathan's face changed in an instant. The casual calm of a Saturday morning evaporated. His instincts clicked into place, not those of a father, but of a man trained for high-alert environments. He grabbed his phone, keys, and his uniform jacket. There was no question about it. He was showing up in full dress. Tanya's tone told him everything. She needed presence. Authority. Not just her father, but who her father was. He zipped up the jacket, fastened his ribbons, and smoothed down the patch on his shoulder that read Special Forces. As he adjusted the deep green beret on his head, he caught his reflection in the mirror by the door. This wasn't ego, it was armor. He was stepping into a situation where everything about him, his posture, his tone, his story, had to counteract assumptions before they were even voiced. The black SUV rolled onto the road within a minute. His mind replayed every possibility. Was she safe? Was she handcuffed? Was she alone with a hostile officer? He gritted his teeth, remembering all the stories he'd heard from other soldiers with kids. Traffic stops that went wrong. Moments when someone didn't believe their child's truth. 15 minutes later, as he turned onto Pine, the police cruiser came into view. The blue sedan, his wife's, was parked just ahead, and standing next to it was Tanya, her posture straight but clearly stiff with tension. A white officer stood nearby, his stance casual in a way that rubbed Nathan the wrong way. As if this was routine, as if nothing serious was happening here. Nathan parked behind the cruiser and stepped out slowly, deliberately. Tanya turned her head, and the look on her face was everything: relief, pride, but also embarrassment. She had never needed saving. She had always been the fixer. But right now she needed backup. Officer Cartwright turned to look. His eyes flicked up and down Nathan's uniform. First the polished boots, then the jacket, neatly buttoned, then the medals, the patch, and finally, the beret. Nathan extended his hand without a smile. "Good afternoon. I'm Master Sergeant Nathan Brooks. This is my daughter." Cartwright hesitated, then shook his hand. "Officer Henry Cartwright, your daughter was operating a vehicle illegally. No licensed adult, defective taillight." Nathan nodded once, expression unreadable. "I understand." "And she explained to you why she was driving?" "She said her mother needed medication, said she was trying to help," Cartwright replied, his voice neutral now, no trace of the laugh Tanya had texted about. "She also mentioned she told you I was Special Forces." Cartwright shifted slightly. "She did. That's a common excuse around here. You know, my dad's a Marine or my uncle's in Delta. Kids say a lot to avoid tickets." Nathan's eyes didn't flinch. "But did she lie?" Cartwright's jaw tightened just slightly. "No, apparently not. I've just returned from a classified deployment. This week was supposed to be quiet. My wife is on painkillers after spinal surgery. Tanya stepped up because we didn't have anyone else." Cartwright glanced toward Tanya. "Be that as it may, sir, the law—" "I know the law," Nathan interrupted. "I also know discretion is part of your job. She wasn't out for ice cream. She was picking up medication, and from the look of it, she wasn't causing a traffic issue until you stopped her." There was no heat in his voice, only precision, the same kind he used when coordinating extractions or de-escalating village standoffs. Tanya looked between the two men. Officer Cartwright didn't seem so smug now. He looked unsure. Nathan took a small step closer. "I want to be very clear. I'm not asking you to ignore the law. But I am asking you to recognize what kind of message you're sending when a black girl tells you her father is a decorated soldier, and your first reaction is to laugh in her face." Cartwright opened his mouth to respond, then shut it again. "You may not remember the words you used," Nathan continued, "but she will, for the rest of her life." Cartwright's face flushed a light pink. I didn't mean to disrespect her. That wasn't my intention." "Intentions don't change the impact," Nathan said evenly. A silence fell. Tanya shifted her weight. Her shoulders had dropped slightly, the fight softening now that her father had taken the field. Finally, Cartwright let out a breath. "I can issue a warning for the taillight, and I'll file this as a community-based incident. No ticket. But you'll need to fix the defect." "We'll fix it today," Nathan replied. Cartwright scribbled something on a pad, then handed a copy to Nathan. "Here's the reference. Just so you have it for your records." Nathan accepted it, then nodded once. "Thank you." Cartwright looked at Tanya. "You have a good dad." Tanya met his gaze. "I always have." Without another word, Nathan placed a gentle hand on Tanya's shoulder and led her toward the SUV. As they drove away, he kept one eye on the road, the other on her expression. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Better now. I'm proud of you, you know. You stayed calm. You stood your ground, and you told the truth." "I wasn't sure it would matter," she admitted. "It didn't at first. It always matters," he said quietly. "Especially when someone thinks it doesn't." Tanya watched the trees blur past. "He laughed, Dad. When I said you were Special Forces." Like I was making it up. Nathan's grip on the wheel tightened. "Next time he won't." She turned to look at him. "Did you show up like that on purpose?" "I showed up how the world would listen." And in that moment, Tanya understood the quiet burden her father carried, not just of service, but of visibility. Sometimes being seen for who you are meant wearing every medal and letting your silence speak louder than any defense. The car rolled down Maple Ridge, but everything felt different now. Tanya wasn't just a teenager who got pulled over. She was the daughter of a soldier, and someone had just learned what that truly meant. Tanya sat in the passenger seat, her eyes following the dotted yellow lines on the road as they passed. The silence in the car was no longer heavy with fear, but with thought. Her dad, Master Sergeant Nathan Brooks, drove calmly, his hand resting firm on the wheel, the other occasionally adjusting the AC vent. The cool air helped, but it couldn't quite chill the emotion burning behind Tanya's eyes. "Do you think he meant to humiliate me?" she asked suddenly. Nathan didn't answer right away. He let the question hang in the air before responding. "I think he didn't believe you, and that's almost the same thing." Tanya looked at her reflection in the side mirror. Her cheeks still held the faint blush of frustration, and her jaw was tight. "But why? Why would someone just laugh in my face like that? Like I wasn't even worth considering?" Nathan inhaled through his nose, steady and slow, like he always did before speaking to soldiers in combat zones who had seen too much. But this was different. This was his daughter, and her wound was fresh. "Because the world trains some people to doubt you before you even open your mouth," he said. "It's not always about you. Sometimes it's about their own limited imagination." Tanya blinked hard. "So no matter how careful I am, how respectful, how good, I still get laughed at. That's exactly why you keep being all those things," Nathan said, "because that's how we change the equation, not by shouting. Not by folding, but by standing, even when it shakes." The car rolled into the pharmacy parking lot. Nathan parked and cut the engine. For a second, neither moved. "I could have handled it, you know," Tanya said, voice softer now. "I wasn't scared." "Not really." "I know," Nathan replied. "That's what scared me the most." They walked into the pharmacy together. The automatic doors slid open with a gentle whoosh, revealing bright fluorescent lights and shelves stacked high with goods. At the counter, a teenage clerk in a blue vest greeted them with a half-smile. "We're here to pick up a prescription for Denise Brooks," Nathan said, his voice carrying the same authority it had when giving orders to troops overseas. The clerk typed into the computer, nodded, then disappeared into the back. As they waited, Tanya noticed a small cluster of people by the window. An older man glanced their way, then again. His eyes narrowed at Nathan's uniform. Tanya tensed, but Nathan just folded his arms and stood still. "He's looking at you," she whispered. "I know. What if he says something? Then I'll respond." The clerk returned with a paper bag. "You're all set," he said. "Thank you," Nathan replied. He didn't smile, but there was warmth in his tone. The clerk looked relieved. As they exited, the older man by the window finally spoke. "Special Forces?" he asked, not unkindly. Nathan turned toward him, nodding. "Fifth Group." The man gave a slow, thoughtful nod. "My brother was in the 101st back in Vietnam, lost a lot of friends." Nathan extended his hand. "Appreciate your family's service." They shook, and Tanya saw something pass between them. Mutual understanding, maybe, or just a recognition that some things ran deeper than skin. Back in the SUV, Tanya looked out the window. "That guy, he was staring at you like Officer Cartwright did. But then, he didn't treat you the same." "Because sometimes," Nathan said, starting the engine, "people choose curiosity over judgment. And when they do, you meet them halfway." The ride home was quieter, more reflective. When they pulled into their driveway, Regina was sitting upright on the porch, with a book on her lap. She stood slowly as they approached. "You get it?" she asked. Nathan nodded, handing her the bag, "and got the taillight fixed too." Regina kissed Tanya's forehead. "You okay, baby?" "I am now," Tanya said. But the moment hung between them longer than expected. They went inside. Tanya sat at the dining table, watching her mom pour a glass of water and take her pain meds. The domestic routine grounded her, but she couldn't stop thinking about that roadside moment, about being alone, afraid, dismissed. Later that evening, Tanya lay on her bed, scrolling through her phone. She opened a notes app and began typing. "Today I learned that people might doubt your story, not because it's unbelievable, but because they've never made space for someone like you to be the truth." She paused, reread the line, then added, "I also learned that when the world questions your story, having someone who believes you, fully and without hesitation, is everything." Downstairs, Nathan stood in the kitchen, talking quietly with Regina. She held her ground, he said. "Did everything right." And he still laughed. Regina's eyes welled. "You think he would have done that if she were white?" Nathan didn't answer. Because they both knew. The next morning in Riverdale was cool and gray. Rain hovered in the clouds, and the town moved slower than usual. Nathan stood by the front window of their modest home, sipping black coffee, eyes fixed on the street outside. Tanya had just left for school, and Regina was resting quietly in the back room after another night of pain. He should have been on base by now. A full debrief and transition briefing awaited him. New chain of command, reports from his unit, protocols for reintegration after deployment. But instead, he had taken the day off. Unofficially, there were calls to make. Questions he needed answers to. What happened with Tanya the day before had lodged itself in his mind like a splinter. He didn't just want to respond. He wanted to change something. Upstairs in her room, Tanya scrolled through comments on a post she'd written late last night. A few hundred words, short and raw, titled, "When the world laughs before you finish speaking." She hadn't posted it to be viral, just to get it out. But by morning, it had been shared dozens of times on her school's student page. She tapped through the notifications. Most were supportive. Some were private messages from classmates she barely knew, saying things like, "This happened to my cousin too," or "Thank you for writing that." But one comment stopped her. "Cops don't laugh at people who follow the law. Maybe stop breaking it and start listening." Anonymous. Tanya stared at it. Her chest tightened and her fingers hovered over the screen. She could have replied, could have defended herself. But she didn't. She just took a screenshot and sent it to her dad with a single caption. "Still think it's over?" Downstairs, Nathan read the message, then picked up his phone and made the call he'd been avoiding. "Sergeant Brooks," a crisp voice answered. "Lieutenant Marin, this is Master Sergeant Nathan Brooks. I need a moment of your time, off record." "Of course." "Everything okay?" "It's about an incident that occurred yesterday in town, involving my daughter and Officer Cartwright." There was a long pause on the other end. "I heard something about that," Marin finally said. "Local PD didn't file any disciplinary action or report." "Which means they didn't think there was anything wrong," Nathan replied. "But there was. And it's not going away." "I see. You're calling for what exactly?" "I'm calling because this isn't just about a traffic stop. It's about culture." Pattern. Dismissal. Lieutenant Marin exhaled slowly. "Do you want to file a formal complaint?" "Not yet," Nathan said. "I want to talk to the chief, in person, not as a soldier. As a father." By noon, a meeting was arranged. Meanwhile, at school, Tanya navigated the hallways with more awareness than usual. She felt eyes on her, not just from friends, but from students who had never spoken to her. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable. She passed a group of boys in the senior wing who quieted as she walked by, one of them muttering, "That's her, the one with the Special Forces daddy." It wasn't a compliment. In AP History, her teacher, Mrs. Graves, pulled her aside after class. "I read what you posted," she said softly. Tanya nodded, unsure how to respond. "I want you to know something," the teacher continued. "I've taught in this town for 22 years, and I've seen kids punished harder for less, and some who've walked away from worse because of who they were or weren't. What you're doing matters." Tanya blinked. "I'm not doing anything. It just happened." "You told the truth," Mrs. Graves said, "and that's more than most adults manage when they're afraid." Back across town, Nathan sat in a small conference room at the Riverdale Police Department. The Chief of Police, Harold Winslow, entered with a practiced smile. Tall, late 50s, clean-shaven, ex-Marine. Nathan had seen his file. They shook hands firmly. "I appreciate you coming in," Winslow said. "I appreciate you agreeing to speak directly," Nathan replied. "Most men in your position send their PR officers instead." Winslow nodded and they both sat. "I want to ask you something straight," Nathan began. "Had my daughter been white, same permit, same situation, would Cartwright have laughed at her?" Winslow's face twitched almost imperceptibly. "I can't answer that definitively. But you know it's possible." The chief didn't speak. Nathan leaned forward. "She told him I was Special Forces. He laughed." Didn't check, just assumed she was lying. That's not about protocol. That's about perception. That's about who gets believed without credentials. Chief Winslow sighed. "I've served." "I get where you're coming from." "No, sir," Nathan said. "With respect, you may understand the service, but you don't get where I'm coming from unless you've had to train your daughter to stay calm while being dismissed. To keep her hands on the wheel like her life depends on it, and then come home to tell you someone laughed in her face and called her truth a joke." Silence. "I don't want a press conference. I don't want a headline. I want you to fix what happened so it doesn't happen again." Winslow nodded slowly. "Officer Cartwright will be pulled in for retraining. We'll review the footage, and I'll personally speak to every officer about judgment, perception, and conduct in these stops." Nathan stood. "Then I'll hold you to that. Because this isn't over for my daughter. She still has to walk into rooms full of people who doubt her story because a man in uniform showed her that disbelief is the default." Outside, rain had started to fall. Nathan walked to his SUV, the droplets dotting his jacket. He opened a text from Tanya. "Going to speak at Student Forum tomorrow. Is that okay?" He smiled for the first time that day and typed back, "It's more than okay. Tell them exactly what happened. Truth doesn't need permission." The next morning, the clouds had broken, but Tanya's nerves hadn't. She stood at the edge of the gymnasium stage at Riverdale High, heart thudding in her chest, hands clutching a printed copy of her short speech. The school's weekly student forum, a place for announcements, club updates, and the occasional guest speaker, was not where she expected to be telling her story. But after her post went viral among the student body, the principal's assistant had approached her in the hallway with a surprising suggestion. "You don't have to," the woman had said gently. "But a lot of students would benefit from hearing what you went through. Not just the fear, the resilience." Now here she was, staring at rows of bleachers filled with students and teachers. She spotted her friend Aisha near the front, giving her a silent thumbs up. Coach Daniels leaned against the back wall, arms folded, eyebrows raised, not mocking, but watchful. A few students from the football team whispered to each other as she approached the mic. She exhaled, steadying her voice. Most of you know me. I'm Tanya Brooks. I'm a junior. And until 2 days ago, I was just another face in the hallway trying to pass chemistry and get through SAT prep. The room chuckled lightly. She continued. But Tuesday afternoon, I drove my mom's car without a licensed adult. She was in pain. Post-surgery, needed medicine. I knew I wasn't supposed to drive alone. I knew it was risky. But I thought being responsible mattered more than following every rule exactly. The crowd was quiet now. Tanya's voice remained calm, but her hands trembled slightly. I got pulled over. The officer saw I had a permit and that I was alone. I expected a lecture, maybe even a ticket. What I didn't expect was being laughed at. A ripple of reaction moved through the bleachers. I told him my dad was in Special Forces. I wasn't lying. I just thought, maybe if he knew, he'd understand this wasn't some teenager trying to joyride. He laughed, said, "Sure he is, sweetie." As if people like me, girls like me, don't have dads who serve at that level. A few teachers shifted in their seats. Tanya kept going. He never asked to verify. Never paused to consider that maybe, just maybe, the story was true, because sometimes the problem isn't just disbelief. It's what people believe about who you are before you even open your mouth. She folded her paper slowly. My dad did show up, in uniform. And everything changed. But it shouldn't take that. We shouldn't have to pull out resumes, badges, or medals to be treated with basic decency. Some of you will forget this by lunch. Some of you will roll your eyes. But if even one of you remembers the next time someone tells you something that seems too much to be true, maybe, just maybe, you'll believe them. The room was silent. Then a single clap. Then more. It wasn't thunderous, but it was real. Tanya stepped back, her face flushed but proud. Later that day, as she sat alone in the library, scrolling through comments on the forum video someone had posted, she noticed a message from an unfamiliar name. It read, "You said exactly what I've been too afraid to." Thank you. My dad wears a badge too, but people only ever assume he's security. Marissa J. Tanya's chest tightened. The validation wasn't just personal, it was communal. She wasn't just speaking for herself. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Officer Cartwright sat in a closed-door review meeting with Chief Winslow and a department attorney. His voice was clipped, defensive. She was breaking the law. I followed protocol. Chief Winslow leaned forward. Your body cam says otherwise. So does your tone, the laughter. The dismissiveness. You didn't just follow protocol, officer. You projected bias. You assumed she was lying and treated her like a joke. Cartwright's jaw tensed. So now I'm a racist because I didn't believe a kid's wild story? No, Winslow replied firmly. You're under review because you failed to do your job with professionalism and integrity. And you embarrassed this department in front of a war hero's family and a community that already has trust issues with law enforcement. The attorney slid a folder across the table. Per department guidelines, you'll be required to complete bias training, shadow under senior officers for 2 weeks, and issue a formal written apology. Cartwright scoffed. You're seriously making me write an apology letter? No, the chief said. We're giving you the opportunity to try and salvage your badge. The question is whether you want to or not. That night, while Tanya finished homework at the kitchen table, her father sat beside her, sipping tea and reading. Regina was resting better than she had in days. The home was peaceful. Did you mean it? Nathan asked without looking up. Tanya raised an eyebrow. Mean what? What you said in your speech today, that you don't want people to have to wear proof on their chest just to be believed. She thought about it. Yeah. I did, but I know the world doesn't work that way. At least not yet, Nathan nodded. Then maybe it's on us to change the world a little, she smiled, one gymnasium at a time. One gymnasium, he echoed, and one quiet man at a police station who used to think dismissing a girl like you was harmless. They sat in silence again, the kind that feels like progress, like forward motion, small, maybe, but certain. The first ripples of something much larger than them both. The early morning air in Riverdale felt heavier than usual. Tanya woke up to the sound of quiet voices in the kitchen. She crept down the hall, still in pajamas, and found her dad on the phone with someone, his voice low but steady. "Understood, sir. Yes, I'll report at 0900, but I'd like to discuss the Community Engagement Project proposal after the briefing. Yes, I believe it's overdue. Thank you." When he hung up, Tanya raised an eyebrow. "Another mission?" Nathan turned to face her, shaking his head with a soft smile. "No, baby girl. Just a different kind of service this time." "Here, at home." Tanya poured herself a bowl of cereal and sat across from him. "You sounded serious." "I was. There's something happening at the department. Chief Winslow wants to partner with a few returning veterans to help lead bias training and public outreach. They want someone who's been through it on both sides." She stirred her cereal without eating. "Because of what happened with me. In part. And because your video hit more than this school. Local news picked it up last night. Even the base commander saw it." Tanya blinked. "Wait, my video?" Nathan pulled up his phone and showed her the clip, the one from the school forum. It had already reached 42,000 views and counting. There were comments, hundreds of them, some angry, some grateful. Some filled with stories that sounded too familiar. "They see you," Nathan said gently. "They hear you now." Later that day, Tanya found herself walking into the Riverdale Civic Center. Her father had invited her to attend a roundtable discussion hosted by the city's Office of Community Engagement. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the flyer read, "Youth, Policing, and Trust, a Town Conversation." Inside, she spotted Officer Cartwright before he spotted her. He sat stiffly near the back, dressed not in uniform but in a simple blue button-up, looking uncomfortable in the sea of community leaders, teachers, parents, and students. Tanya kept her distance at first, watching from the edge. Her dad was speaking to a small group near the podium, including Chief Winslow and Reverend Elijah Bell, one of the town's most respected black clergy. "I've seen too many young people silenced," Reverend Bell was saying. What happened to Tanya isn't rare. What's rare is a community willing to do something after it happens. Nathan nodded. "That's why we're here. Not to shame, to reshape." The conversation eventually shifted to breakout groups. Tanya was assigned to one with 2 school board members, a Latino father from the East End, a white businesswoman who owned the bakery downtown, and, unexpectedly, Officer Cartwright. He didn't speak at first, just listened. Tanya could feel his gaze flicker toward her, but she didn't look up. Not until Ms. Halverson from the school board asked, "Tanya, if you could change one thing about how adults see teens in this town, what would it be?" She exhaled slowly. "I'd ask them to stop assuming the worst. To stop thinking we're guilty before we even explain. I know rules matter, but dignity does too." Everyone nodded. Except Cartwright. He was staring down at the table, chewing the inside of his cheek. "I owe you an apology," he said suddenly. His voice was rough, as if the words hurt to say. "I wasn't just dismissive. I was wrong." The table fell quiet. "I've pulled over hundreds of drivers, but when I saw you, I didn't see a person. I saw a problem. I didn't listen because I didn't want to be proven wrong." Tanya looked him in the eyes for the first time. "Do you know what hurt the most?" she asked. "It wasn't the ticket. It was the laugh, like I was ridiculous for believing my story mattered." Cartwright swallowed hard. "I've replayed that moment in my head 100 times. And every time I wish I'd listened." Nathan, watching from another table, didn't interfere. He simply observed, arms folded, a protective calm in his stance. Not because Tanya needed rescuing, because she was holding her own. Reverend Bell stepped over at the end of the session. "Would you be willing," he asked Cartwright and Tanya, "to speak together at next month's Youth Police Dialogue Forum?" Real stories, both sides. There was a long pause. "Yes," Tanya said. Cartwright nodded. "Yes." As the room emptied, Nathan approached his daughter, pride glinting in his eyes. "You didn't just speak truth," he said. "You invited change." Tanya smiled faintly. "I learned from the best." Back at home that night, as they ate dinner around the small kitchen table, Tanya watched her mom laugh at something on the news. Her dad reached across the table to refill Denise's water. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were starting to shape something bigger, out of the pain, out of the pressure, something purposeful. Later, in her room, Tanya opened her laptop and began typing. A new post, not a rant, not a story about being mistreated. Just a title, "What Happens When They Finally Listen?" And below it, "We tell them what to change, and then we make sure they do." The following week brought a storm, both outside and within the community. The Riverdale Gazette ran a front-page article titled, "Teens' Courage Sparks Citywide Reform," featuring a photo of Tanya with her father outside the Civic Center. The caption read, "From dismissed to heard." That morning, Tanya sat in the back of her school library, laptop open, inbox flooded. Some emails came from students she didn't know. Others came from parents, veterans, even retired cops. A few were hateful, of course, accusing her of stirring trouble, of exaggerating. But the overwhelming majority thanked her, told her she gave them hope. Across town, Officer Cartwright sat in the precinct break room staring at a similar article pinned on the bulletin board. His colleagues passed by, quiet. Some gave curt nods, others offered neutral glances, but there was no mocking laughter anymore. No eye rolls. The department had changed subtly, because everyone now knew they were being watched and evaluated. "You're brave for showing up," Officer Melendez told him, sipping her coffee beside him. "Some wouldn't." Cartwright didn't answer immediately. He stared down into his cup. "It's not brave if it comes after the damage," he muttered. Melendez gave a small shrug. "Maybe not. But it's something. You're not pretending it didn't happen. That counts." Meanwhile, Nathan Williams sat in Colonel Thompson's office at the base. The colonel, built like a retired linebacker and twice as direct, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're turning heads, Sergeant," he said. "Not just around here. We've got emails from Fort Bragg, D.C., even a call from someone at Homeland asking about that community program you mentioned." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect this kind of traction." Thompson chuckled. "Neither did I. But when soldiers return home and still lead, people notice." He pushed a folder across the desk. "We'd like you to formally co-lead a civilian military leadership program. It starts small, 10-week pilot, local outreach. But it could grow into something national." Nathan opened the folder slowly, scanning the proposal. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," Thompson replied. "But it's your call. We're not ordering this. We're asking. Because what you and Tanya did, that's leadership, and people need to learn it." Back at school, Tanya was called to the office between classes. Her heart raced at first. Old instincts flared. Had someone complained again? Was the school pulling her from the project? But when she arrived, Principal Rosenberg greeted her with a smile. "I wanted to let you know," he said, "you've been nominated for the State Youth Civic Achievement Award." Tanya blinked. "What?" "Community leaders submitted your name. They were impressed by your composure, your message, and your ability to open dialogue. It's a big deal." "Only 3 students statewide get it each year." She stood silent for a moment, absorbing that. "I didn't do it for awards," she finally said. Rosenberg nodded. "That's exactly why you deserve one." As she walked out of the office, students in the hallway turned. Some smiled, some gave quiet nods. And one even stopped her near the lockers. "Hey," said Jordan, a sophomore she barely knew. "I watched your video with my dad." "He cried. He never cries. He's a Vietnam vet." "He said you reminded him of why he served." Tanya wasn't sure what to say. She just thanked him, then walked on, heart thudding, not from fear this time, but from the weight of something bigger than herself. That evening, the Williams family sat around the dinner table again. Denise, looking stronger by the day, had returned to light kitchen duty. She served pasta and salad while humming. "So," she said, setting the final plate, "any more national attention today?" Nathan laughed. "Not yet, but the mayor's office did call." Tanya looked up. "What for?" "They want you to speak at the city's annual MLK Day event." "Main stage. With me." Tanya dropped her fork. "What?" Denise grinned. "They want you to talk about bridging communities, about what happens when courage meets resistance." Tanya felt her face flush. I don't know what I'd say." "You'll know," Nathan said gently. "You've already been saying it." Later that night, Tanya stood by her bedroom window looking out over Riverdale. Lights flickered across quiet streets. In the distance, she could just barely make out the Civic Center glowing under street lamps. She thought about that day, about the traffic stop, about how her world had shifted, about how a laugh had triggered something larger than either she or Officer Cartwright could have imagined, and she thought about what came next, because this wasn't the end. It was never supposed to be. It was just the turning point, the chapter where the real change begins. The auditorium was packed, every seat filled, aisles lined with folding chairs, people standing in the back, students, teachers, veterans, church leaders, local officials. Even the mayor had shown up, quietly seated in the second row. On stage, a massive screen displayed the evening's theme in bold white letters: Bridging Divides, Courage in the Face of Injustice. Tanya stood backstage, staring down at her note cards. Her palms were damp. Her heart was a metronome inside her chest. Across from her, Nathan adjusted his tie. He wasn't in uniform tonight. This wasn't a military event. It was a community one. Tonight, he wasn't Master Sergeant James Nathaniel Williams. He was Tanya's father, and that meant more. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, though her voice cracked a little when she said, "Yeah, I want to get it right." "You will," he replied, "because you lived it." They were introduced together by the MC, a city councilwoman who had watched Tanya's story unfold and reached out personally. "We welcome to the stage 2 people who turned a moment of injustice into a movement of awareness," she said. "A daughter and a father, a student and a soldier, both leading in their own way." Applause thundered as they walked out, side by side. Tanya approached the podium, adjusted the mic slightly, and looked out across the sea of faces. It felt surreal. Just a few weeks ago, she was standing on a sidewalk being accused of lying. Now, they wanted to hear her speak. "I didn't think I'd be standing here tonight," she began. "Actually, I didn't think I'd be speaking to anyone beyond a traffic stop." A soft laugh rippled through the audience. "But something changed that day, not just for me, but for people who look like me." for kids who get dismissed before they even finish a sentence, for daughters of veterans, for girls who carry responsibilities that nobody sees. She paused, feeling the words settle in the room. When that officer laughed at me, it wasn't just about doubting my story. It was about something deeper. It was about deciding what kind of people deserve belief. Respect, patience, and that kind of decision, when it's made in 10 seconds on the side of the road, can shape a person's life. She took a breath and glanced back at her father. But what happened next wasn't just about a father in uniform walking up. It was about a truth becoming undeniable. My truth. Our truth. That dignity doesn't come from a badge or a title. It comes from showing up. From telling the truth even when it gets laughed at. She looked out again, voice steadying. This story got attention, but I don't want it to be the last one of its kind. I want it to be the start of teachers listening when a kid speaks up, of officers slowing down before making assumptions, of students knowing their voice matters, even when someone tries to silence it. A standing ovation didn't erupt just yet, but there was a hush, an emotional silence more powerful than claps. People were listening. Tanya stepped back as Nathan took the mic. He didn't bring notes. He didn't need them. I've been in more combat zones than I care to count, he began. But nothing prepares you for the day your daughter calls because the person sworn to protect her sees her as a problem instead of a person. He scanned the crowd. I wear this country's uniform with pride, but it means nothing if that pride isn't reflected back home. If my daughter can't be safe in her own town, if her honesty can be laughed off. He let the weight of that sit before adding, but tonight I'm hopeful, because I've seen change begin. In how we talk, in how we listen, in how one voice, Tanya's voice, has become a ripple turning into a wave. When they stepped back together, the applause came in full. Not just polite, not just appreciative, but thunderous. After the event, a line formed, people wanting to thank them, shake hands, share their own stories. One elderly black man approached Tanya with a cane in one hand and tears in his eyes. "You made me feel seen," he whispered. "That's a rare thing." She hugged him. Later that night, back at home, Tanya curled up on the couch, barefoot, hair loose, a bowl of popcorn in her lap. Nathan was beside her, reading news comments aloud. "This girl's bravery restored my faith in young people," he read, scrolling. "We need more kids like Tanya and more parents like Nathan." Denise smiled from the kitchen. "Sounds like we're famous." Tanya laughed. "I'm just glad people got the message." Nathan put the phone down and turned to her. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "You didn't just tell the world who you are. You made them listen." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Maybe someone else out there needed to hear it too. They sat in silence a moment, soaking in the peace that had once felt so distant. Outside, the street was quiet. No flashing lights. No uniforms, just a porch light glowing warm and steady in the night. And somewhere across the country, another girl, maybe scared, maybe silenced, was finding her voice because she'd seen someone else use theirs. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, hit that like button. Leave a comment about the part that stuck with you most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter. Because every voice deserves to be heard, especially the ones the world tries to overlook.